shalom to everybody. I hope you guys have been having an amazing week. Sources is very active for those people who are interested in knowledge and wisdom and truth, and it's coming and manifesting on all different kinds of levels. And so, shalom to each and every one of you. I hope that you're finding new levels of light in many areas. We are learning much that, well, is still secret to probably even the mass majority of people who are seeking enlightenment. And it's wonderful, it's amazing, it's overwhelming, scary, difficult. Lots of different things go with all of the pieces of truth that are coming out, most of which is quite ancient. And so I hope each and every one of you are experiencing a new piece of your journey with your higher self. Inevitably, that is the only way that we will achieve anything. And so we're going to find today really amazing. I want to get going because I want to go as far as I can. This is just so cool. It's so overwhelming. It's so amazing, the pieces that we've been learning, you know. Just so you guys know, there's now starting to be the wind, just as this sage is clearing out negativity. There's starting to be a wind floating around the Vatican, and it's little by little, priests are starting to take information out of the Vatican library, and it is now being learned that the reason that they took all of the books out of the Bible that they did was because they exposed that Yeshua believed in reincarnation, and they could not have that being taught to people that you are coming back. So just keep your eyes open and watch. As this whole enlightenment goes on as it is, it's going to manifest in everywhere. It might be last in religion, or it might be hardest fought in religion, but I can promise you it's already, the light is beginning to flood in places that it hasn't existed. And so for us, that means that we should then be ready and be prepared so we can help those people who have zero knowledge about the things that I'm constantly exposing to you guys. And so it's coming on many different levels, but it's all the same purpose, that truth is exposed and that people then can choose to make a decision one way or another. So we come together with a heart center, and then we say to you, Namaste. We're going to pick up today in Jesus and the Essenes, and take off. We've been experiencing. You've been learning some things. If you've been paying attention, that maybe it really was true that Yeshua wasn't at all what he's been presented to you. For some of you, as I said, Source gave me a vision of a situation, and the purpose of the vision was to help me understand why there are people who don't like the truth. And the sum of it is because I like the traditional belief more than what you're teaching. And you understand, Source wasn't deterred by that, neither was I to be. He just wanted me to understand. And so we're going to pick up here and go, and you'll be blown away at how amazing all of these pieces. I hope that you're gathering them and put them together, because really every week it might seem like it's insignificant. There's 2 or 3 major points every week about his belief system, and today there might be 4 or 5 things. So I hope you can see that and swallow it, if you would. So we laid off with, I had read in an Edgar Casey book that Mary had been chosen from many other young girls. So I questioned with this in mind. And see, if you come from a Christian background, you have no idea of this. although it was recorded in history. Uh, and so Dolores asked Saudi, did they choose her from others? And because our belief systems have been so horribly corrupt, we had no knowledge that people even lived like this or believed like this. And so Saudi responds, he says, how can we choose the mother of the Messiah? It is not up to us, that is up to Yahweh. But he allowed us to know so that we might instruct her and perhaps guide her upon the path. The elders knew, but they did not choose. And so it's very important for him that you understand, while they had ancient knowledge and they had knowledge of writings and they had knowledge of the stars, because that was before astrology became this horrible thing that was going to send you to hell because you were part of the occult. And he speaks to that some a little bit. So it was an insight that this was going to happen, but as you'll see, there were actually many women whose charts were very close to hers, and they had to take all of the mitigating factors. It wasn't so they could choose Mary. It was so that they, as learned ones, would know which one of the options it was going to be. And so he says, but he allowed us to know so that we might instruct her and perhaps guide her upon the path. The elders knew, but they did not choose. It is said that there are others whose charts could possibly have fit. But there was study, and it was decided that this was the only basic decision that I can think of was made. The chart was read, and it was finally understood in what was meant. I'm not explaining this very well. And so Dolores says, oh, I think you're doing an excellent job of it. How is the chart made up? Well, some of you may not, some of you may. But if you have a true astrological chart done, it's all based off down to the very minute that you were born. And so that was the norm for them. It wasn't occultic, it wasn't witchcraft, it was mystical, and it was where the world lived at that time. The nonsense that you've been taught that makes everything devil worship is very, very young in virtue. You have something that's only 2,000 years old versus things that are 10, 15, and 20,000 years old. It's a false knowledge. And so the chart was read, and it was finally understood in what was meant. And so Dolores tells him, you're doing a good job. And Saudi says, it is said that it has to do with the points at which the stars lie when you are born and the path that they take while you live. But I do not create these, therefore I know very little about them. The master of this is Ben Goliad. I remember when that we went to classes, they tried to teach me to follow the stars, and I'm not very good at this. It was not my field of study. But this is how she was chosen from her chart. And so we see today that there have been people outside of religion who continue the ancient ways, and believe it or not, your personality and a lot of your quirks and makeups are in the middle of this chart. It's funny, if you go read a chart, you can find, and if you know that person when you read the chart, you can tell pretty quickly that there's more to this than accident. And so Dolores says he was becoming frustrated. We were having a communication problem here, understanding exactly what he meant. And so Saudi says, you still do not understand. We did not choose her. We were allowed to have the knowledge in which to find out who she was in order that we might help her along her path. Very deliberately, as though talking to a child. The only thing as far as someone's decision is about the interpretation of these charts. There were several girls who were born at approximately the same times that it was possible, and therefore the ultimate interpretation came from above. Came about, but it also came from above. This was when that it was discovered that she would be the mother of the Messiah. And of course, many of you know that he was the Messiah, but he was not what Israel was looking for. They expected him to come and be the true king of the Jew in the order of David, and he had zero interest in their order. And so Dolores says, I thought I'd better drop this topic, so I switched back to Ben Yosef. Do you know what he will do with his life? And Saudi, sadly, yes, he is very special. And Dolores says, can you share it? And Saudi responds, it is not for me to share. It will be made known in time. Now, one of the things that maybe you are, and I hope you are, bringing into order that here's a person that's talking to something that's very ancient, and it's very difficult to understand exactly the nuances of what their life was. We can only see the world to a large extent. If you're a Christian, you see the world through Christian eyes. And Christian eyes says that everything that's not Christian is bad. It's witchcraft and yada, 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 yada. And this is who Jesus is. And this is what Jesus did. And this is what Jesus meant. And this is what Jesus said. And I'm going to be bringing some teachings. I sent Brother Cliff a clip today that I hope that you guys will go watch. It's actually worse than what I thought it was. Because now even nuances that appeared to have some relevancy are starting to be spun again. And once again, the knowledge is ancient, that it really is even further having to do with our bodies. The whole writing in the Torah of the temple, friend, is literally nothing but a metaphor of your physical body, mind, pineal gland, and on and on. The cherubims that cover over the seat, friend, is the two lobes of your brain. I'm telling you, there's about to be some stuff that's going to start breaking these lies off. And so, very sadly, Saudi says, yes, he is very special. And Dolores says, can you share it? He says, it is not for me to share. It will be made known in time. Do you think he will travel again? Saudi says, I have no way of knowing, but here he is now. He lives with us. He said that his travels opened his eyes to many things and that he was heretofore blind of. And in this, that it did great, great good. So you will see a total paradigm morphing of his view of the Messiah versus the lie of Christianity, of the Christ. The Christ is real. We are to be that Christ. But that doesn't occur in the manner, in fact, enlightenment is not at all what you think enlightenment is. And we're going to get into that as we go. It's infinitely deeper than the surface that we're scratching now. And so that may take a while to load enough information to where you can grab a hold of some concepts. And he says, I have no way of knowing. I know he's here now. And he lives with us. He said that his travels opened his eyes to many things that he was heretofore blind of, and in this that it did great, great good. Well, here's a piece, a little sidetrack I want you to take with that. Christianity had zero words to say about a 16-year time span. So when he says he traveled, he didn't travel for a few days, friend. He spent years studying, and everything he had been taught in Judaism that wasn't true, he found it out. 6 years in one Tibetan monastery, and yet I haven't met one Christian that even knows that. People's jaw hit the ground when I tell them he was a mystic. Why? Because they're ignorant and unlearned. Exactly what we learned in the gospel of truth, that all people are in source, but the people who do not know don't know because they're ignorant. And that isn't some slam. You just lack knowledge and understanding. You have to have both of them. And so Yeshua goes away and travels with his uncle on a ship while his uncle's doing business in England and China and Tibet and India. He's all over the world with his uncle, and all this time his purpose of going is to learn what could not be taught to him in Israel. And so Dolores asked, why did he travel to the other countries? And Saudi responds, to learn of the people. It was told that they traded, which they did, but they also did a lot of learning and speaking to people and finding out their views on things in life. And so you keep seeing the implication here of they, so plural. I believe that his traveling partner was in fact his uncle, who would have had the money to afford it for him to be able to do this. But I also believe there was maybe a little more to Joseph of Arimathea than what we also have knowledge of. And he was also a seeker of the truth, right there with his nephew. He may not have spent 6 years in Tibet, but if he took him to Tibet, you can almost be guaranteed he brought him back from Tibet. And so Dolores asked then, do you think he might have gone to the religious leaders of the countries? And Saudi responds, it is not for me to say. I have not questioned him. So while this guy was his teacher, it apparently wasn't in a manner. And whether that came from reverence from him or whether that came from who Yeshua was. Remember, there are some really profound and these are deeper teachings, but I'm going to graze the surface of them. When we get to a point and we begin to look at the scriptures, and I begin to expose the scriptures to you about why he never taught, the Bible actually explains it, but Christianity has no knowledge of what it explains. It was very, very much intentional. Yeshua was very much about people who were not, if you want to say, called, anointed, intended to hear the truth, that everyone else just walked around in la la land with no knowledge of what he was saying. And he teaches that, and inevitably, guys, this all morphs around our brain and goes directly back to meditation and higher self-awareness. That's a big statement. And so, do you think he might have gone to the religious leaders of the countries? Saudi has no clue. And so Dolores says, the next mention of Jesus was 5 years later when I spoke to Saudi as he journeyed to see his sister in Bethesda prior to her death. And she says, see chapter 12. And so Dolores asked him, have you had any news lately of Ben Yosef? And Saudi says, no, not very recent, no. It is said that he travels, and I do not know if he returned. It was not for any length of time. And so Dolores then asked, well, what about Ben Zacharias? Have you heard any news of him? And Saudi responds, he said, it is said that he has gone out into the world and is gathering followers. And he is supposed to be the way shower or the preparer. Am I correct? Dolores asking. He frowned deeply. It seemed to bother him that I knew this. And he says to her, I did not speak of this to you. And so Dolores says, well, someone did. You don't think you told me about it? He quickly went on the defensive and answered coldly, I do not remember. And so Dolores says, well, I know it is supposed to be secret, but we aren't going to tell anyone. I suppose he is not ready yet to let people know. Saudi responds, no, he is gathering followers, knowledge, and strength to prepare. Chapter 23, Jesus' ministry begins. So his traveling is done, 16 years. He's been in and out of Israel. As his uncle's ship came to port, he would come see his family. He would get back on a boat, and he would be gone for another 5 years. And so Dolores says, I moved Saudi ahead again to another important day in his life. If any of you have ever had a past life regression, this is the way you move from time in a life. And he had been staying for a while with his cousins in Nazareth. He had not been back to Qumran for many months, and his voice seemed tired. And he says, I'm getting too old to travel everywhere. He and his cousins were at the synagogue in Nazareth, and I received a pleasant surprise when I asked if he had heard any news of Ben Yosef. Saudi responds, it is he who we are waiting to hear. So Saudi announced Jesus had been back from his travels for maybe 6 months, but Saudi had not yet heard where he had been. Since Saudi was just a member of the large congregation in the synagogue, he did not know if he would be able to speak with him or not. And I asked him to describe what was happening. And so this is as close as we will probably ever get to a firsthand experience of one of Yeshua's first teaching ministry messages in the synagogue in Nazareth. And so he says, he's just reading of the Torah and speaking of the scriptures to looking for the right word, define them in terms which we can understand. Now, I promise you what he was defining, and you're going to find that out here in a minute, is exactly what I've kind of alluded to you. It had nothing to do with Christianity. He was totally metaphysical. He was totally mystical. Listen. And define them in terms which we can understand. He is reading about the promises that God made of the Savior. He is reading also of Ezra and the promises that were made that Israel would again become a great nation. Has he been doing this before? And Saudi says, it is done. From the time you have reached your bar mitzvah, you are allowed to speak in the synagogue, to read the Torah, but this is unusual. In the synagogue, there are a lot of times when great arguments that go on. Most of you couldn't imagine that, because if a great argument goes on, it's probably because some guy confronted another guy about some situation with some guy's wife. And then I've seen some of those come near to fistfights, but very seldom is it over doctrine or teaching. Why? Because we all have the truth, so why would we need to argue about it? See, that's what happens when you become brainwashed. And so he says, from the time that you reach, then the privilege can be extended to you to speak. That's we find in a place in the New Testament where it is said Yeshua stood up, and what did he do? He read Isaiah and then said, today this has been fulfilled in your eyes. To read the Torah, but this is unusual. In the synagogue, there are a lot of times great arguments that go on. Tonight, there is no arguing. The people, they are very quiet. He has a beautiful voice that is very easy to listen to. He is also trying to explain a different concept about the different universes. So that's one of your first giveaway of a metaphysical appearance, an esoteric appearance. Eso means covered, teric knowledge. This is hidden knowledge, and Yeshua is trying to expose it, which is what his ministry really was. It had nothing to do with Judaism. And so he has such a beautiful voice, and he's trying to explain this different concept of, about different universes. Well, that right there, you should know, should put you in a conflictory situation, because according to the Old Testament, there is only one universe that we hear about. And so that in itself is quite marvelous. He's also trying to explain a concept about the different universes and how all of our lives are interconnected. Friends, that's language that you hear today in the New Age movement, that we are all God. We all have divine in us. We all came from the same source. And so it's not new. He was teaching it 2,000 years ago. And he is also trying to explain a different concept about the different universes and how all of our lives are interconnected. He is using the example of a tapestry to simplify what he is talking about. The tapestry, you look on the back side and it's woven like a cloth. You look on the front side and there's pictures and action going on. The back side, where it's woven like a cloth, the structure of the universes. And the front side, where you can see a pattern to it, that is our lives imposed upon the universes. He is trying to have them understand this, although some do and some do not. And it's quite simple to see that that remains the same today. And I was wondering, when he started performing his miracles, I asked if the people had noticed anything unusual or different about this man. Saudi responds. He says most of them just know that he is very gentle and calm. That if they have needs or problems, that they can go to him and he will listen. Saudi's voice was very quiet as he spoke of this scene. Ben Joseph was not aware that Saudi was there amongst the people, and I could almost see the aging teacher at the back or the side of the dimly lit synagogue, quietly listening with the others. And out of all of the people there, only he perhaps knew who this man was and what tremendous destiny before him as he begun his ministry. And so Yeshua, physical description was that of a man with gray eyes. Now this is going to, for all of the purists and all of the Hebrew purists, this is going to be a little bit shocking, friends, because even your olive-skinned, dark-haired pictures are incorrect if this is true. Quite surprising. Listen. Jesus' physical description was that of a man with gray eyes, light reddish-yellow hair, and a short beard. He was slightly taller than the average man of that time, very slender, of a fine mold. He was wearing a light blue robe and the prayer robe, which is a long cloth that the Jewish men wear even today while in synagogue. It is draped about their head and shoulders like a shawl, and his eyes are very piercing. They stare out of his face like something alive. And so Dolores asked, "What do you think of him?" And Saudi responds, and there was pride and love in his voice. "I am very pleased. I think he is a good man, and I think he will do well." And Dolores says, "Do you think he learned well the lessons you taught him?" Saudi responds, "I taught him nothing. I just opened his eyes to what was there." And so Dolores asked him again, "Do you think he has changed since the last time you saw him?" And Saudi responds, "He has grown more at peace. He is like a slow-moving river that is very deep. You do not know what runs underneath the surface." And so Dolores says, "I thought perhaps now Saudi would tell me Ben Joseph's other name." Remember, he got upset that couldn't be explored. And she says if he had gone out into the world, there would no longer be need to protect him so closely. And so Saudi responds, Yeshua. This is his name. I had him repeat it several times in order to get it correctly. You can be sure at this time, Dolores had no concept of what his Hebrew name even was. All she had ever heard was Jesus. And Saudi never heard of him as Jesus. In fact, if we could go back into this time and go back to that day and ask him, was Jesus the Messiah? He would probably become quite angry at you, or he would laugh at you to scorn. Because everyone knows that Yeshua is the Messiah, and there is no other besides Yeshua. And so I had him repeat it several times in order to get it correctly. It was phonetically Yeshua, with a strong accent on the first syllable. So Dolores says to him, will you be talking to Yeshua before he leaves tonight? And Saudi responds softly, I think not. I think just knowing would be enough. I just wish to hear him speak words. He has grown well, and I can feel inside that perhaps I helped. And so after I'd finished writing this book, I came across a little-known book called the Arco Volume by Dr. McIntyre and Twyman, which was originally published in 1887. These men had found written reports in the Vatican Library that were sent to Rome during the time of the Anointed, or the Christ. They had them translated from their original language, and one of these contained a description of Jesus that amazingly matches everything that Saudi had said about him. Okay? And here's a piece. While he is nothing but a man. Wow. There was no concept. You hear no concept in Saudi's language at all about him being any divine being, any more so than we all are. But see, it was also a given with Saudi that we are all divine beings. We don't know that. You guys are trying to attain salvation when you never needed it in the first place. You were told you needed it so that you could fail, so that you could be put under bondage. Because had they told you how great you were, you would have never followed all the false teachings that they taught you. And so, he says there is something about him that distinguishes him from every other man. He is the picture of his mother, only he has not her smooth and round face. His hair is a little more golden than hers, which tells you that hers was also red, not black, like every picture you've ever seen. Though it is as much from sunburn as anything else. He is tall, and his shoulders are a little dropped. His visage is thin and a swarthy complexion, though this is from exposure. His eyes are large and a soft blue and rather dull and heavy. The lashes are long and his eyebrows are very large. His nose is that of a Jew. In fact, he reminds me of an old-fashioned Jew in every sense of the word. He is not a great talker unless there is something brought up about heaven and divine things, when his tongue moves glibly and his eyes light up with a peculiar brilliancy. Though there is this particularity about Jesus, he never argues a question. He never disputes. He will commence and state facts, and they are on such a solid basis that nobody will have the boldness to dispute with him. Though opponents though he has such mastership of judgment, he takes no pride in confuting with his opponents. He always seems to be sorry for them. I've seen him attacked by the scribes and the doctors of the law, and they seemed like little children learning their lessons under a master. When Jesus left the synagogue after the service, he was going to his parents' house. Since Saudi was not planning on speaking with him, we probably would not have been able to learn much more, so I decided to move Saudi ahead another 5 years to an important day in his life, and he was in Nazareth and was speaking with a friend. Saudi's words. He says that he had heard of Yeshua and that he is beginning to preach to the others, and that the word is being spread. It is said that already in the few months that he has spoken, that great crowds come to listen to what he has to say in hopes that he will perform a miracle. It is known that the powers are very strong that flow through him. Now, I want to just add this for all of our benefits right now. I truly have always believed, although I have got to experience glimpses of it, but I haven't come to the place where I will, that I'm functioning in this as he did, although I believe that will happen. There is something amazingly significant that you're about to learn, and I'm sorrowful you could never learn this in Christianity. They could have taught you, and you could have had the best scholars that exist, even the Michael Heisers, and you still would have never learned what you're about to learn, friends, in just a few minutes. Look. It is known that the powers are very strong that flow through him. So Saudi is setting you up, and there's some statements he makes that we can do well to grab a hold of with all of our hearts. It is said that he has cured a leper who but touched his robe. Well, you're going to find out that the metaphor here, why this is going on, and why all of the things, all of the pieces of words that you have no clue of, there will in our future will come forthcoming, that every one of these things that you read in the New Testament is a metaphor. The hem of his robe is a part in the cosmology of mystical teaching, is actually a place that happens inside of your brain. I've already said too much. He said that it is this man's faith that made him whole. And that how could such a one, having so great a faith, be but part of a man? Therefore, he would be whole. It is also said that there were the people who could not see who could see. There are many miracles that have been said to have happened. And the only one that I am sure of is the leopard. A friend of mine saw this happen. He said that believing that just to touch the cloak would to make him whole, and that his faith had done so. So there was nothing that Yeshua did. It was what was going on in the mind of this person. That person knows many things which were inherently normal to them that are totally obscure to most of us. And that, my friend, when that veil begins to be rent, we will begin to fulfill verses that Yeshua spoke like never before. It is coming. And so he says the only one I'm sure about is the healing of the leopard, just because I wasn't there. But I had a good friend who saw this leper be totally cured. His white skin become healthy again, just exactly as you find out happened in the Moses scenario in the desert when the healing occurred. And so Dolores asked, was it because his faith was so great in Yeshua? Good question, huh? Is it simply because he believed that Yeshua was the Messiah? Is that what healed him? And Saudi says that his faith was so great in God. What? Now, this is the Messiah, but it wasn't about his faith in Jesus. It was about his faith in God. We don't find any long pretenses of prayer here. We don't find any dancing and speaking in tongues here. We simply find a guy who encounters a man El, a man who knows he is an El, and his belief that if I can reach out and touch him, which is also another metaphor, and the hem of his garment, which is also another metaphor, that if I can do that, then I will be made whole. Notice it did not say that he could be healed of leprosy. He was not just healed of leprosy, he was made whole. A complete human again, even as we all already are with no knowledge. That concept right there is, I just exploded it 10,000 times for you. None of that whole story is literal. It's all speaking a message to us about something that is infinitely greater than we have any knowledge of. And it's so amazing to me every day how Source brings these pieces, and then I find the relevance of them. And so a friend of mine saw this happen. It wasn't fake. It was real. Somebody eyewitnessed it. And he said that believing that just to touch the cloak would to make him whole, that his faith had done so. So Dolores asked, was it because his faith was so great in Yeshua? That would be a pertinent question, because that's what we were told in Christianity. And Saudi responds probably kind of indignantly, it wasn't about him having faith in Yeshua, it was about his faith in God. Is that how you explained what happened, or can you explain it? Saudi says, dig this. See, to us, this is all the things that Christian concocted up and inflamed and lied to you about. All of these people that lived in that time that were metaphysical, that were mystical, that were believers in the truth. That's why nobody wants to deal with the Kabbalah of Israel, because the Kabbalah exposes all of these hidden teachings that you have no idea of, that you were told were witchcraft. And it's not witchcraft. And so he says, I know how it is done. So here we have Saudi walking around teaching Yeshua and teaching Ben Zacharias or John the Immerser. And he goes, sure, man, that's no big deal. I know exactly how this works. But to explain it is something else. The giving of the energy to heal. Wow. The giving of the energy to heal. To be accepted is part of it. It must be accepted. Do you know why we don't see any truths? We don't see any miracles? Folks, there's a really strong indictment, and I'm sorry because I've known lots of people that have been Christian for lots of years. And Yeshua makes a blanket statement. Once again, this is a metaphor. It's a parable that he's speaking. And if you understand the underlying message, it very much condemns all of Christianity minus a few people. But he said, these things that I do will you do also if you believe. Do you know why it doesn't happen? Because you don't believe it. You might convince yourself, you might pray to a God who doesn't even exist out there. Once again, the closet of prayer is a metaphor. And so he says, the giving of the energy to heal, to be accepted. How many of you that are around me have heard me say that we should send love? We should send healing. What I'm saying to you is that we should work the work that Jesus did, and how he did it was by sending the energy that is inside of us. And the fact that you don't know that is quite shocking, or should be. But it's not, because we were, as I say all the time, Christianity told you that there was a spirituality and did nothing. In fact, they actually worked hard to hide the fact that you could possess those powers. It's no different than demonology. Why is it that only Catholic priests seem to be the ones who cast demons out? Because they're the only ones who know the function, and that it's really not that difficult. Your lack of knowledge and your fear of things that you think you're weaker than, while in fact the spirit forces on one level are want to cause you fear, because that's the only way you can be weak enough for them to conquer you. And they thrive on that. The weaker they make you, the more fear you have, the stronger they become. And so that's why most people are defeated in 99% of their life. And so the giving of the energy to heal, to be accepted, is part of it. It must be accepted, and it is also said to have faith in this. So therefore, the man's faith made it possible for him to be whole. Had nothing to do with Yeshua, except him being a vehicle of light, him having knowledge of who he was, and him releasing his energy, and his energy mixed with that man's energy, and that man's faith brought supernatural healing. Exactly what Yeshua said all of us are supposed to be doing. I can guarantee you Big Pharma don't want you to learn this. And so Dolores asked him, this is her synopsis of what he just said. It happened because the man was willing to accept the energy. I believe there's been many people I laid my hands on, and I said it in the past, my faith wasn't what was lacking. It was theirs. My energy, my aura was there. It was powerful. There's no question that's true. It wasn't me. It was their acceptance of those things, their belief in those things. And so it must be accepted, and it is also said to have faith in this. So therefore, the man's faith made it possible for him to be whole. So when Yeshua said your faith has made you whole, that is yet again another hidden underlying metaphoric teaching. Because it's not just your faith. I've had people say, well, I believe in Jesus. So if that's of any value, then why don't you have even one testimony of the person that you send healing to and they were healed? Since that's what you're supposed to be if you understand Jesus. That's why you don't find it. That's why you've heard people in your family and people in your church pray hundreds of thousands of prayer and never see anything happen. There is no manifestation of the spiritual. There's only concoctions of fake spirit. And so he says it happened because the man was willing to accept the energy. Do you understand the concept that the mass majority of people that are not healed because they refuse it? The power's here, friends. It's everywhere. I am light. I don't care if you see it or don't. I am light. And there is power inside of all of us in ways that we can't even fathom because it's been hidden from us. But that's changing. And so Dolores asks, then you don't think it was anything that Yeshua himself did? So the truth of the matter is Jesus never healed anybody. You're going to find that out. Look at this. Saudi responds, he was a channel. Now, how did he know the term channel 2,000 years ago, friend? And some of you, if you've even cared or dared to go watch anything that has to do with the messages that are being channeled by the thousands on this earth, I'm sorrowful. I don't know how you can get there. You wouldn't have liked Jesus. You would have ran from him. Just as people are today. Saudi understood that Jesus was nothing. He was just a man. You were just a man. But the power that lived inside of him and the power that lives inside of you are the same power. The same God lived in him that lives in you. The only difference is that he spent the time to find out what that meant. So he was a channel. I cannot explain it any better. That the power of God flowed from inside of him and out of him. Not from heaven to him to out. That's a total messed up belief system that we have. God and the kingdom of heaven are not in the heavenlies, friends. There is no God up there in the sky. He was a channel. I cannot explain it any better. He would often go into meditation with the person to be healed. Now, wouldn't that be a kick in your pants to find out that you had to go meditate with Yeshua before you got any healing? And yet, it's too difficult for us to meditate. That's why you have no knowledge of the spiritual. Because spiritual can only come from a higher mind. It can't come through the lesser mind. The Bible tells you that very explicitly multiple times. Everybody's looking for the same fake that they got in Christianity. They want fake spirituality. And I'm telling you, it's never going to be there. And so he was a channel. I cannot explain it any better. He would often go into meditation with the person to be healed, and while they're in a meditative state. So dig this. You couldn't have gotten a healing because you couldn't have sat with him and get your mind to a state of higher consciousness, which is the purpose of meditation, is to shut your dirty, corrupted, conscious mind out of the picture. That's the purpose. When you lay down and you try to be still and you try to be quiet and your mind keeps running, that is your enemy. You can never experience spirituality in a lower state. And so he would often go into meditation and then do so with the people that needed to be healed. And he would often, in this meditative state, he would transfer some of his energy to them. And sometimes people who were looking on could see the tangibility, could physically see the energy going from one to the other. When he said, my virtue, my goodness, my energy has left me. And so Dolores asked him, what did it look like when they saw it? He says, it looked like a glow of light from, say, his hand to the affected part of the person's body. For those of you who may never experience this, I promise you, friend, what you're reading in this book, I have experienced in front of people in my church. Listen. And their auras will start to glow. When somebody says, I watched that person preach, and there used to be a light that came around them, if you had any understanding at all, you would have realized what that was, and it would have changed every behavior from that point forward. But most people have no knowledge of what's even going on. That is the exposure of an aura of the person. You're getting to see what is there all the time. And the auras would start to glow and they would get brighter, to where people who ordinarily did not see the aura could also see this person's aura, physically with their eyes, a light glowing behind them. This would explain the halos shown around Jesus in old paintings. In the earliest ones, he is shown having a halo all over his whole body, which is exactly how we look. And in later ones, he is just shown with the halo around his head. This must have come from the stories of people seeing his aura brighten during these energy exchange as he performed miracles. And so Sadi says, this is why they would meditate first. Do you understand why Christianity doesn't want you to learn this? Because you wouldn't have lived 60 years or 40 years or 30 years or 20 years if you knew that there was zero possibility for you to connect with the supernatural power of God for the things that you need. You would have never stayed in Christianity your whole lifetime. It's a scam. It's okay, it was only a little white lie. Remember, those aren't bad. Jesus was okay with white lies. And so Dolores says, this must have come from the stories of people seeing his aura brighten during these energy exchanges. When the anointing, when the oil, which you will find out that the Holy of Holies is in you, and the anointing oil is something that is actually in you. It's not something put on you, although we did those things. And they must come from the stories of people seeing this. So this aura and the energy is everything, friends. So he says, this is why they would meditate first. The person would say they wanted to be healed, and they would get into a meditative state of mind. So do you see what's going? Do you see how huge this little bitty statement is? Can I sum it up in a simple statement? No meditation, no healing. It's that simple. And you won't get any now. The same way. That's why millions get prayed for. They've never seen it work because it doesn't work, and they have no faith in it because they've never had a reason to have faith in it. You're doomed. People are going to live their lives, keep going to the doctors. They're never going to experience the supernatural. And all of this, if you think that I'm barking or I'm mad, I'm not. This blows me away, man. Some of these things I've been fighting with for 30 years. I've experienced some of this stuff that we're talking about here tonight. I have experienced it. Wow. And so I never thought about having somebody come into my office and me sit cross-legged in the floor and go into a trance, and them go into a trance with me, and then I transfer the energy that already is me, because I am energy. I am light. And a simple transfer of that energy leaving my body would hit their body and healing would come. Wow. Instead, we have lines at the front where everybody believes because Christianity has told them if you fall down at the front of the church, when somebody touches you, then that must have been the Holy Spirit. It was all a stage show, friends. All of your Christian stage shows of people speaking in tongues is all a bunch of BS. So the person would say they wanted to be healed. So the first act was that I had to take responsibility for my position. I've had situations, and some of you may find it hard to believe. I had one guy that was in my church and his daughter, and I told the guy when I first came and I met this guy and I saw his little retarded daughter, and I said to him, I said, "Sir, you do know that God can heal your daughter?" He said, "Oh, no, sir. If God heals my daughter, they'll take her Social Security away." You think I'm playing? This goes on all the time. So the person would first off have to say that they wanted to be healed. And as I said, it may seem far-fetched to you, but I've seen way too many situations just like I just shared with you firsthand of people who did not want God to heal them. And so they would get into a meditative state of mind so that they would be receptive to the energy. And the meditative state of mind is talking about reaching and accessing your higher consciousness. I was going to say unconsciousness, but there's actually three consciousnesses: higher consciousness, normal consciousness, and subconscious. The higher conscious is the spirit state. And so they have to get in this spirit state to where the kundalini rises up, the snake crawls up their back into their brain, the Holy of Holies. And they get into a meditative state in their mind so that they would be receptive to the energy. Stop and pose just a question to you, just for you to think about. If they had to get in a meditative state of mind, does that not validate what I said, that no meditation, no healing? That was a state of mind that they had to get to before healing occurred. So they did really well about hiding that from you, and we didn't know the secret codes that are now revealing themselves everywhere. It's all over the Bible, friends. That book ain't nothing but a metaphor. And so, because if they resisted, then it would not take place. So if they resisted meditation, they would, and to bring themselves into that place in the mind, if they refused and fought against that, they would receive no healing. How many people do you think that it's very probable, although nobody talks about it, how many people do you think that Yeshua, just like I have done with people that Yeshua had encounters with that said they wanted healing, but the rest of it never happened? And Yeshua went away, and that person will never be written about in the New Testament. Because if they resisted, then it would not take place. And I cannot explain it any better than that. Believe me, Saudi, it's right on the money. And so Dolores asked, is Yeshua meeting any opposition? And Saudi responds, it is said that there are people who are unhappy because he goes around and he preaches love. God. God is love, and in him is no darkness at all. We can settle that, friend. And that's easy to say those words, but to understand those words and to live in those words is a totally different thing. And especially when you've been programmed your whole life that God is love unless you're a human and you mess up and then he wants to kill you. And you lived your whole life under that bondage, believing God hated you because you yourself saw that you weren't perfect. That's why it's one of the most common statements in Christianity. Well, you know, brother, nobody's perfect. So that must make it okay, right? Although actually the Bible tells you that you are to be perfect. Yeshua did. And so it is said that there are people who are unhappy because he goes around and he preaches love. The zealots are very unhappy. They wish him to say, I am the Messiah, follow me, I will be your king. And they would take up arms in a minute, at a moment's notice, but he will never say this. And so Dolores says, you say that he preaches love. Love for each other, love for God. So he responds, he speaks highly of love between your neighbors, love between your brothers, and love towards strangers. That's all just human. To love someone, to share this with others, is to share God with others. God is love. He is anything that fills a void that is inside. To share love with one another is the greatest thing that you can do because it is sharing God. You are giving freely of yourself to another without thought of any return. This is part of the message. The people have accepted that the Lord God has a place in everyday existence. And they are learning to share this with one another. So they were learning about their divinity. And they are learning to share this with one another to grow closer with this message. So Dolores asked, you said the people think he should just say, I am the Messiah? Do you think he is the Messiah? Saudi responds emphatically, he is. And Dolores says, does he know this? And Saudi says, yes. This was taught to him since he was very young, who he was and what was to be. But to announce such would be, they would be able to proclaim him crazy or a blasphemer. Which is, if you remember on his last night, or as recorded in the metaphor, if you remember, he exposed some of those things, and that's exactly what they charged him of. So what does that do? That simply validates that what this guy is saying. He did not say, you have said it, that I am the Son of God, until the night that they were going to kill him. Because he knew exactly what would have happened. And so they would be able to proclaim him crazy or a blasphemer, which is what they did. And they did the same thing to Paul. And he tells them he is the Son of Man. You ever wondered about why you hear Son of Man, Son of God? You're about to find out what that's about. Although we are all the Son of Man, and we are all the Son of God. And so Dolores asked, well, what does this mean? Saudi says, he is, as we all are, the sons of man and God. I want an affirmation second here. I want an affirmation. Only if you believe it, but I want an affirmation to share with you. If you didn't do anything else and you simply daily ask yourself while you're walking through your day, whether you be in a quiet time working on something or a quiet time driving or any time that you have just a few seconds, would it affect your life over the course of a year if you actually brought yourself in time to a place where you actually believe that? Where you actually believe that Christ is in you and you are in him, just exactly as he said. That, in fact, not just must you be in him, and not must he just be in you, but you must become him. That is Christ in you. That's not Jesus inside of you like is taught in Sunday school. I had a little boy in my church come up when service was over, and there was something, and they had asked me if I'd pray with him, and I prayed with him in the manner in which I knew, and the little boy said, "Oh, don't worry, Pastor, Jesus is in my heart." I said, "And you mean if you die and your heart got cut open, then Jesus would be sitting in there?" And he said, "Yeah." And I just rubbed him on his head and let it go. sorrowful. There's not a little man Jesus sitting inside of you in your heart. It has nothing to do with the man. That's the huge problem that we're encountering. It has nothing to do with the man. He was simply a messenger. I also am a messenger. There are many messengers on this earth. None are without significance. The problem is unless they're doing something big on TV, the mass majority of people give them no significance. And so Dolores asks, what does that mean? Saudi says, he is, as we all are, sons of man and sons of God. I cannot explain this very well. He is God's son as I am God's son. But his destiny is to bring light in a greater way than I could. But that has nothing to do with who he is. That has to do with his intended function for coming on this earth. His divine destiny, if you would. People don't like a destiny because it seems like a predetermined end that you have no choice in. And the truth is it is your choice to accept your destiny or not. Most will not. But his destiny is to bring light in a greater way than I could. Does that mean that Saudi's significance of teaching Yeshua was any less important than the fact that Yeshua could bring light to other people in a greater way? Or were they all parts of the same whole? And of course the answer is they were part of the same whole. Saudi's work was as important as Yeshua's work is. And Saudi's work and Yeshua's work is no more important than your work is. And until you know that, and until you believe that in you with all of your heart, you're pretty much locked where you're at. That's why most people never see change. They weep and they cry about how horrible they are, but they never do anything to change. And next week, they'll be back in the same state. And next week, they'll be back in the same state. And next week, they'll be back in the same state. Never any change, only the constant pain and suffering of never being able to move forward in the spirit realm. And it goes on every day, all the time. He is closer to his final destiny than I am. I am so far off, but he is almost to the point where we all strive. He is the next closest thing to perfection. So did you hear what he just said? He just effectively, from someone who told you that he taught Yeshua, he just told you even Yeshua has not reached perfection. Why? Because he's a human. Pretty crazy. He has learned his lessons and he has followed his path to its completion. So here's a huge piece for you. You understand everybody who follows the path doesn't reach completion. The difference and what made him an ascended master was that he followed his path and he did come to completion. When you hear about karmic load being done away, the concept is the same picture. You have come to completion. In other words, you have come to a place where you cease to sin. You've come to a place where you are disciplined and you are no longer held captive by your carnal mind, which is what makes you cry and go on and next week do the same thing. You are functioning at that level in a carnal mind only. So what was the difference about him? This is a huge lesson that we can all glean from. This is for you, dear one, whoever you are. He has learned his lessons. When you hear about people coming back in, that they came in for a purpose, and there was a lesson. You're on this earth, and there is a lesson that you intended when you were reincarnated. There was a lesson that you came to this earth. That is inevitably your purpose for being on this earth right now. I have lessons that I have to learn, and I have lessons that I am to unlearn. And he has followed his path to its completion. Why did he not have a karmic load? Because he was ascended. Why can we not worry about the next time we come in having the karmic load from our past lives like all of us are living with right now? The only way to do that is that we complete the task at hand. And if we don't, we'll come back again and we'll go through the same test, and the same test, and the same test, and the same test. And for many, it takes many lives. That doesn't mean that it has to. That means that you made a choice not to accept truth. Because truth comes from the mouth of God, and it is spirit. And that is what must be accepted. I didn't say that's what was taught you. That's really hard because we believe that the truth set us free. We thought what Christianity told us was freedom. And in fact, it was deeper bondage than we would have been had we never been in Christianity. Wow. And so she asked Saudi, "So you think this means he is perfect?" Saudi responds, "He shall be." That's a future statement. It was his choice to come once again in order to give this light to people. He did not have to come back. And if you've listened to any that I've shared about reincarnation, the picture that was just painted right there is exactly to the T what I've shared with every one of you. That you make a choice about coming back into this earth. This body we live in, friends, is not who we are. It is only where we're living. That's all. And if you let it run you, it will run you spiritually into the ground. That is your carnal mind. And it will spiritually kill you. And so you think this means he is perfect, and Saudi says he shall be. It was his choice to come once again in order to give this light to the people. He did not have to come back. After this life, would he ever return again? Saudi responds, "So it has been said, but for what purpose? I don't know." So do you have any news of Ben Zacharias? Let's see what old John's up to. And Saudi responds, "It is said that he is at the Jordan and many people listen to him." And he said, as he says, "A voice crying in the wilderness, perhaps to open the hearts and the ears of men to the news that the Great One is here. There are many like the zealots who find him very attractive." You can read all of these things will manifest in history if you go read them. Pontius Pilate was scared to death because they were scared, and the king were scared because they knew that if John would try to raise an insurrection, that all of Israel would have followed him. Perhaps to open the hearts and the ears of men to the news that the Great One is here. There are many, like the zealots, who find him very attractive because he is so fierce. He is as a wild man. His pathway was different, and I have not seen him for many, many years. Dolores asks, "Do you think he has changed?" Saudi says, "No, he was always very fierce." He had been massaging his left elbow for quite a while as we talked, and I asked him about it. He said his joint was giving him pain. "I'm a very old man," he said with a sigh. "They said that I have very little time left." He said he was ill with the coughing sickness and had been staying with his cousins in Nazareth permanently. I gave him instructions that his arm would not really bother him and he would feel no physical discomfort. And so Dolores says, "Well, you've seen many things in your life. It was a great thing to be able to teach Ben Yosef and Ben Zacharias." Saudi responds, "Yes, it has been very good." And so I asked who was the king at this time, and he said the first king, Herod, had died, and Herod Antipas was now king, but things were not any better. If anything, he is very much worse. He disliked speaking of either of them, and the subject was distasteful to him. Reference materials refers to Archelaus as the successor to Herod. They do not mention Antipas. Sudi mentioning Philip as another brother, but he never mentions Archelaus. And I thought this conflicting and curious. Surely there would be something in the Bible about this. But Harry and I were reading the Bible more than ever before and getting a great deal more out of it as this history was being relived through Katie's remembrances. But Antipas is not mentioned in the Bible, while Archelaus is said to be the successor of Herod. The king at the time of Christ's birth and the one at his death were both called Herod. During the time of Christ, the king is only called Herod, the tetrarch, in the Bible. Where did Katie ever come up with this name Antipas? And again, research revealed that she was correct. Herod the Great was Jewish by religion from a Roman citizen of Arabian blood, which may explain some of the resentment people had to being ruled by him. As Saudi said, he cannot decide whether he wishes to be Greek or Jew, and therefore he is not a very good one of either. He also was extremely cruel, and he became king in 36 BC at the age of 37 and died in 4 BC. He had murdered some of his own family, but one out of those left alive. 3 of his sons were named to continue the rule. They were Archelaus, Antipas, and Philip. It was decided by the Roman government that the country would be ruled by all 3. They were to be what is called tetrarchs. Sometimes a Roman province would be broken up into sections, and a tetrarch or petty king would rule over a section. Archelaus, being the elder, was given the largest area of Judea and appointed tetrarch or governor. Antipas and Philip were made tetrarchs over the remainder of the kingdom, but Archelaus displeased Rome, and in 6 AD he was banished from the country. Judea then became a third-class Roman province to be directly administered by Roman procurators. This was officially who managed the financial affairs and acted as a government, Pontius Pilate. The most famous of those were, of course, Pontius Pilate. Philip was at this time ruling northern Palestine. Since he was not making waves, he was allowed to continue. After Archelaus was banished, Antipas took his place and became tetrarch over the largest part of Judea. He adopted the name of Herod, and he was the one in power at the time of the beheading of John and the death of Christ. It is amazing to me how Katie could have known these uncommon names involved with history at the time unless she was there. Saudi sounded so old and tired and sad during the last part of this session. I was hoping that he would live during the entire lifetime of Jesus. I wanted to get more information about his life. How many times does a chance like this come along? But now it appeared that Saudi might die just as Jesus was beginning his ministry. And I hope to get the story of the crucifixion, but how? Saudi was in Nazareth, too ill to travel, and Jesus was crucified in Jerusalem, quite a distance away. Even if Saudi lived, it looked very doubtful that he would have been able to travel there. So it appeared he would die on us before the story was finished. I hope maybe there would be some way, but if not, we would just have to be grateful for what information we had received. I had taken Saudi ahead in time to when he was about 50 years old. He was sitting on the hills above Nazareth, probably not far from his cousin's house, and his voice sounded very weary. Sigh. I'm very old. I'm 51 something, 52. I'm very tired. I'm a very old man. It was hard for me to accept that age as old, but I suppose it was so in their culture. I told him I do not think of him as an old man. Saudi responds, but it is. It is of an age where that many men have died sooner. I'm an old man. And so Dolores asks, what are you doing up in the hills? He says, it is not so far. I could not walk far. I am communing. You understand that there are pieces of meditation that are tied with this communing. What was he doing? He was walking in the quiet place. The metaphor for you, friends, just so that you know, because I'm going to reveal a little secret again, the metaphor in the Bible that nobody has ever had the knowledge to express to you, I will share with you. The Adam, the man, the ahopmo, the dirt, that walked with God in the evening was meditation. And he says, it is not far. I could not walk far. I'm communing, trying to bring myself into touch with the universe and meditate upon my life. When? In the cool of the evening. The picture's always been there in front of everybody. Nobody has a clue about how do you walk with God. Why did Adam walk with God in the evening? Adam went and sat down with his back and his kundalini and his chakras lined up, and he went into a place above his carnal mind. That's how he spoke with God. When Jesus went up into the hill, he went up and sat on a rock, probably crossed his legs, put his fingers together, and he meditated. It was a given. If you understood talking to God, that's not you praying to some God that supposedly exists in heaven. That's you inside of yourself. That's why you can't find him. Because you're looking in all the wrong places. He lives in you. So, trying to bring myself into touch with the universe and meditate upon my life. Soon I will die. It is known to me. I have perhaps a year. I no longer am able to take air to breathe. My chest hurts and I cough much. Thus, I know because of this and the fact that I am just very tired. I think there's actually a little more in there that we could look at that has to do with the medical aspects of what he just talked about. And so Dolores asked him, does it bother you to think that your time is almost up? And Saudi responds, why should it? This makes very little sense. This is foolishness. Why not pass on and learn from this experience and start another? Let me ask you a question. How many people that you've watched from your family die, how many of them do you think would have lived differently had they known what the truth was? He sounded so depressed that I wanted to change the subject, but I chose one that was also depressing to him. And Dolores asked, have you heard any news of Ben Zacharias? Saudi says, he has died. He was imprisoned by Herod and beheaded. He disliked talking of it. Why was he put in prison? For preaching sedition? This was an unfamiliar word to me. He preached what they believed was wrong and against the prophets. It is like treason against the state, only it is against God. So I'll just give you a little insight. John was the preparer of the way for Jesus, and John came preaching against religion. You know what Yeshua taught against? Religion. It wasn't because the Jews were horrible people. Jesus would have been the same person, and I believe there probably were many Christs who have been killed for sedition against Christianity. We call it heresy. And so he preached what they believed was wrong and against the prophets. You don't think that will make somebody mad? You go preach that Isaiah's a lie or Daniel is not true? Woo, they get mad at you quick in Christian circles. She began to cough deeply, and I gave her reassuring suggestions that she would feel no real physical discomfort. So Dolores says, I did not think that Herod was a religious man. Why would he be worried about what Ben Zacharias was preaching? Saudi responds, Herod does not know what he believes. This is his faith and his trials. And this is why Herod had him imprisoned. That and the fact that he was afraid of him, of what he would do. He had many followers. What exactly was he preaching? And Saudi responds, the thing that he spoke of were of the Messiah and of his coming, that all sin must be faced. There's a different concept. All sin must be faced. What does that mean? Well, we could define what sin is, and it really wouldn't be as difficult as it might first appear, but if it's a situation of facing something, is that not something that an individual person or people collectively must do? Like America must face what was done to us over the last 4 years. That's why we're finding billions and trillions of dollars that have been taken away from the wealth of the people that live in this country. And so we have to come to face with that. It's starting to be exposed. That they must confess to themselves that they were in the wrong. You know what it goes with most people? They spend more time telling you how they're not wrong. I know I've been saying all these words for years. They're not new, they're just new context. Doing this is half of the battle towards freedom. It was Herod's idea to have him imprisoned so that he would speak with him. But it is said that it was his whore that had him beheaded. Why would a woman have anything to say about something that important? Saudi responds, he preached the truth, and the truth must eventually get through to others. It is said that Herod began to believe. And therefore, since Ben Zacharias spoke so much out against her and her vileness and the life they led, she was afraid of losing power for Herod to believe in what Ben Zacharias was saying. And to face that what he did was wrong, and if he faced this, then would he not have set her aside, and thereby she would lose power? Which is exactly the same motive for everyone who doesn't look at themselves. It's because they don't want to stop. Once again, all correction that comes into our human lives must come from our spirit. You can say you want to stop. You can say you want healing. Every human has done that billions of times. That doesn't make you any different. It's only when you begin to want to stop that so bad that you begin to affect change in your own life. That's the only time. And so, Ben Zacharias said, and to face that what he did was wrong. If he faced this, then would he not have set her aside, and thereby she would lose power? You see the path I'm showing you? If then something happens, what happens? How do you know if you're spiritually changing? Because you're changing. If you're functioning on the same level, that's because there's no change. Change must come. And so Katie paused and Saudi seemed to be having discomfort. There is great difficulty in breathing, lack of air. And so I decided to move Katie forward to relieve her of the physical symptoms. Incidentally, I have never had a case where experiencing these physical reactions have caused any effect on the conscious personality. The subject always awakens feeling fine with no memory of any illness associated with their death in another life. All of that is left totally in the past with the other personality. So Katie didn't have all of these problems. Saudi did through her. So even in that situation, friend, quantum hypnotism is just a controlled, helped form of channeling. So people that go and have, and they are channeling knowledge that is of them, but has come from a past time that has been blocked to them. And so we can only attain some of those things through ascending above our carnal minds. And of course, that's why meditation is here, is so that we learn how to discipline our carnal minds and learn how to use our higher self. That's what that's what this is all about, and it's always been about this. So I hope somebody out there it's more than just yeah, I'm tired. Friends, honestly, in the scheme of things, it's only going to matter for you what you do. But I promise you, these things are real, and you're going to watch them manifest in front of you. And so I believe it is the greatest act of kindness that Source has ever showed, that he is showing us the path to the kingdom. And the kingdom's not up in the sky. I believe that Yeshua said it, that righteousness is the kingdom, and then he also told us that the kingdom is inside of you. So what he really said to us is that righteousness is where God lives. And that righteousness is supposed to come from your heart. So I hope you guys will get something out of this. I hope you will grasp, because there was really a lot that exposed Yeshua's hands. I mean, I'm sorry, you could have had any college-educated New Age book writer that's selling books on Amazon right now could have wrote that, and nobody would have ever associated it with being Yeshua's lifestyle, whether it be meditation for healing. So then what might that tell us? So here's a question I would pose to you. If, hypothetically, if any of this is true, what would it then take for us to get this to manifest in our time? Is it even possible? Have we lived for 2,000 years with so much no belief that it would be almost impossible for people that live in our day to begin to believe so that they begin to see things manifested? Well, you'll understand that manifestation is always tied to your belief anyways. You are receiving, every one of us are receiving what we believe. Whether that's good, whether that's bad, whether that's a blessing, whether that's a curse, whatever it is irrelevant. What it is what you are manifesting. I didn't say what you wanted. I didn't say what you even thought you wanted. It is what you believe. And what you believe is what you get. That's huge. Now, if you do like I do, I've taken that question 10,000 times and asked myself, well, what does it really mean to believe? If I'm supposed to believe like this, how am I supposed to believe? What am I supposed to believe? And I can only tell you that if you will continue on from wherever you are, you will arrive eventually at the place in which you desire to arrive. And I can assure you that will happen. I don't say for who, I just say it will. And so this is a really special time. May you, I'm going to use Saudi's terms. May Yahweh kneel before you. Of course, I can say, may Source kneel before you. May all kneel before you. May God kneel before you. May Allah kneel before you. Presenting you with gifts and guard you with the hedge of protection. May Yahweh will illuminate the wholeness of his being towards you, bringing order. Isn't it funny that he is light and we are light? But it's very far from us in many ways to put together that we are truly the light image of the light. And he will give you comfort and sustenance. Yahweh will lift up his wholeness of being and look upon you, and he will set in place all you need to be whole and complete. That's happening right now. All of these things that we see and every piece of this that we gain, just simply as he said to me in the past, it will be a testimony against them. There are things that Source is watching people do, and because he knows what their behavior is, he knows what the outcome. It's not that he made it. So when he says words like that, well, that will be a testimony against them, or that will be a testimony for them. He's saying this is who this person is, and they're not going to probably change. Not that they couldn't, but they won't choose to. Wow. That's really huge. Because once you possess that knowledge, you can't go backwards. The more that the spirit realm comes and the more he channels and the more that energy is increasing, all of these things that you're hearing are not going to be less heard. They're going to be more heard. We're in really an amazing time in humanity, friends. Really amazing time. We're going to get to see things that my grandfather dreamt of. Although he did see some of these things as well. So, the Bible tells us in wisdom, and all you're getting, get understanding. We've been given a little bit of knowledge that maybe this really isn't so far-fetched. And then tonight, for whatever reason that Source desired to bring out, once again, a re-manifesting of meditation and mind control. And that's not somebody controlling your mind, that's you not controlling your mind. And if you understand meditation, that's what meditation really is about you becoming thoughtless. And that's only where we can function in the supernatural. So I hope you guys will pay heed, and I hope you will give it ear. You truly are blessed. We already are God's children, friends. If you're waiting to be saved, there's no need to wait. You don't need to be saved. This is about how successful you are on this journey, not about him. He's not the one that's in question. You are. God already loves you. God has already given you his image. God has already made you one of his children. And when that knowledge begins to come, the light is supposed to begin to come through in an amazing supernatural way. It has. I know that. For myself anyways. Amazing. I walk around all day, even though it doesn't mean I'm not human, but I'm learning even every day how to control those human aspects of me that I don't deem to be desirable anymore. Why? Because I looked at myself and I came face to face with myself, and myself said, I don't like that. Now, sometimes do I return to that? Habits have to have time. But I know one thing, as long as I never quit, I'll never lose. And so, blessings to each and every one of you. I hope that you truly experience a fullness. I hope that some of you go away right now and this word will hit and sink inside of you in ways maybe that you couldn't even imagine. There will be many that will get nothing. They don't believe it in the first place. So there would be nothing for them to get. That's why he said, those who I want to hear you are going to hear you. And so, blessings to each and every one of you from my heart and from, of course, his too. Namaste.